Okay, good morning once again. This is, I would say good morning to those in the Americas, good afternoon to those in Europe. I would like to welcome you to this session jointly hosted by iFacto and Kubisys. Today we want to discuss actually how you can upgrade your AX ERP without disrupting your business operations. We would basically like to welcome you to the new era of risk-free upgrades. Next slide, please. Today our agenda looks as following, and we first have a brief introduction of our presenters. We'll have some company background on iFacto. We'll also would like to discuss some recent developments within the Dynamics AX arena, as well as the challenges you might encounter when upgrading your Dynamics AX. Continuing our session, we want to introduce, of course, the Kubisys solution and provide a view on the solution. The benefits will become clear with the case studies, and finally we would like to open the floor for some Q&A and close the session with some call for action. Next, please. So today joining me is Greg Christian, VP of Channel Sales at Kubisys, a former VP of Sales at Nokia. And myself, I'm Roger Van Beek. I am leading and developing Into Scope, which is the competence center of AX at the iFacto group. I'm a former VP IT director at Teneurs at FedEx, Descartes, and Itineris, which was an ISV providing AX solutions. Next. So here I would like to give you some extra information about the Cronos group, which is actually the mother company of iFacto. We're a Belgium-based or Benelux-based company. We have had the year-over-year growth of plus 20%. We have approximately about 3,000 people working for the group. We are actually a strategic player with multiple technology partners, it being Oracle, it being SAP, it being Microsoft, it being IBM, it being any CRM solution out there like a Salesforce. We have it all in our group, and we actually have a complete offering of high-quality ICT services and solutions. Now, within the Cronos group, iFacto is the Dynamics cluster, as we call it, or the ERP unit, which encompasses NAV and AX. We're approximately 70 people or 70 consultants large, varying experience. Next slide, I would like to give you some more facts about iFacto itself. It's been having an endeavor above about 10 years. We are part of the Inner Circle and the President's Club for Microsoft Dynamics. We are having more than 250 customers being part of our ecosystem. Our competences are, of course, mainly surrounding the areas of ERP, scanning, in particular warehouse scanning, e-commerce, document management, and we have a variety of management reporting add-on solutions that we provide to our NAV and AX customers. We also have some additional add-on solutions that are vertical solutions, specifically tailored to the food industry, distribution and wholesale, and then of course move and rental. On AX side, we also provide a very specific solution in a partnership with ViroPharma, which is, of course, as it already mentions, really focused on the pharmaceutical industry. Next, please. On this particular slide, I would like to clearly indicate that the Dynamics AX roadmap is a roadmap of innovation, and has been and will be, and it continues to evolve. As you probably are aware, AX7 was recently released, and most of you are probably not all the way up to the current version, which is the AX 2012 R3, and which is a prerequisite for AX7. So upgrading your ERP software is becoming mandatory to stay abreast of the new features. However, the end of the tunnel never comes in sight, except maybe with the AX7 we will have the choice of going further down the line with a cloud hosted solution or an on-premise. Of course, Microsoft is really focused on three main pillars, and which really surround, of course, innovation, mobile, and cloud. And therefore, to get there, you need to have something that will help you overcome the upgrade dilemma. Next, please. And as we all know, in ERP world, upgrading an ERP or upgrading AX is not so simple, because there are a lot of challenges that prevent you from upgrading. First and for all, the risk for the business. Then typically from an IT perspective, providing the value add of an upgrade. And then last but not least, the complexities to port your customizations and to perform your upgrade. Here on this slide, I'm showing you in an illustrative way the roadmap to get to AX 2012 R3, and it really depends on where you're at with your current version on the path. And that can cause you, of course, a lot of headaches. Many customers basically determine that, well, we're going to stay on our current version because we have too many risks involved and we have too low benefit to go to the next release. Next slide, please. So typically the challenges that we do incur are all related, of course, to the increasing complexity of upgrading your Dynamics AX and also keeping your AX current. And one of those is, for instance, the accurate testing that you need to do or perform to actually sign off on your new release or new version of AX. And the root cause there, of course, is typically an inaccurate test environment, because most test environments rarely mirror production configurations. And those environments take a long time to build as well, and a lot of effort. So the inherent risk in upgrading the application and time consumed makes it an expensive proposition. So here I would like to introduce to you Greg Christian, who will now take you into the world of how Kubisys can help you overcome those challenges. Greg?
Thank you, Roger. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, as the case may be. Pleasure to join you today and give you an overview of Kubisys. And as Roger stated, we do have a dynamic solution in the area of real-time creation of production-accurate test environments. So the first question we'd like to answer is, what exactly is Kubisys in 30 words or less, as you can see at the bottom of the screen. Kubisys is a software solution that creates on-demand test environments for Windows-based applications. Each environment is isolated, available within minutes to hours, and is as close to production as possible. Said another way, we use production as the template to create our environments. And before moving to the next slide, just 3 additional comments regarding Kubisys. As you can see, it's for Windows-based applications. Today's webinar is primarily dealing with AX and the complexities with upgrading AX, but it's in any Windows-based application, whether it's SharePoint, BizTalk, any .NET application suite, any third-party ISV, Windows-based applications can also be replicated in totality within our Kubisys test environment. Secondly, is our replication is not contingent on the version of Windows software. You can have heterogeneous levels of software within the Kubisys test environments. We make no distinction or discrimination there, nor do we delineate between physical or virtual servers. We capture your entire production environment. Whether it's physical or virtual makes no matter to our platform. So we're not based on any application, any version of Windows software, nor are we limited by the physical characteristics of your servers. A little bit about the company, as Roger shared about iFacto and Cronos. Kubisys we've been selling our platform for roughly 4 years. And as you can see, we've won a number of awards over this tenure of time. Words that kind of describe Kubisys in terms of breakthrough technology, innovative, Another term that is used to describe Kubisys by our customers is disruptive. We're highly disruptive in a good way, and we quickly become indispensable to companies that have utilized or adopted our solution. One award that we're particularly excited about is in 2013, we were awarded a Gartner Cool Vendor Award in the DevOps space, one of 5 companies in that category. We just released a major new version of software, version 4.0, that basically redefines the product. So it's a great time to be talking to Kubisys. So let's, again, as Roger kind of teed it up, in terms of defining the problem that we're attempting to address today, the issue really comes down, the net is are available. They're typically not representative of production, or if it is production accurate, there's typically not enough. As Roger said, the problems are well known to everyone, you know, on the call. These environments typically are slow to build, can be very resource, organizational intensive in terms of getting the multiple stakeholders from different organizations involved to provision their particular aspect of the test environment that's been requested. Once it's presented, typically the environments are populated by a subset of actual production data or a subset of data. So even if the testing is quote unquote successful within the environment, once it's introduced into production, it can crash the system inadvertently. So it's invalid configurations is a huge issue. It would be ideal with each iteration of QA or UAT testing or last mile staging to be able to refresh the environments in real time. Again, given what we just talked about, that's very difficult to do. And secondly, end-to-end testing would be the preferred model in anyone's organization. And today's largely manual approach, the environments are typically very static, monolithic, and standalone, so there's no end-to-end testing. So the net is you either slow down testing to get it right, which balloons out the deliverable, or you become more aggressive and without sufficient visibility, you inadvertently release errant software into production, and there's unintended downstream consequences. So it comes down to balancing risk versus reward. And a lot of companies are kind of like the deer in the headlights. You know, what do we do? And we have a solution that can basically automate the creation and the provisioning of these environments for you. So basically, you would be outsourcing that environment creation to Kubisys instead of doing it in-house. So you say, well, Greg, that's all well and good. You know, that sounds awesome, but you know, we already had this capability in-house. We have VMware Lab Manager or some similar product, and we get that a lot. Probably 9 out of 10 people will say, well, that sounds really good, but we already have a tool in-house that can do this for us. And the one huge difference, ladies and gentlemen, between Kubisys and your spinning up of VMs is that we're talking about a complete 100% like-for-like replication of the Microsoft solution stack, not piecemeal, but the entire environment. As you can see, we automate the provisioning and the orchestration of creating a cloned environment, a working environment, with the network intact. We're talking about your web front ends, your application servers, your SQL database clusters, if appropriate, any type of NAS or SAN storage-based configuration. Subtleties are captured. Network configurations, including your service accounts, your domain controllers, your IP, your MAC addresses, URLs, any privileges specific to users so that unauthorized users could not access a Kubisys test environment once it's created. The same authentication requirements based to get into production would also apply with Kubisys. So it's like for like 100% cloned replication of your production environment, not a clean VM, but completely orchestrated and provisioned. Hopefully I beat that horse about the head and shoulders sufficiently that you understand the differentiation there. Production accurate test environments, ladies and gentlemen, not VMs. In real time, in minutes and hours as opposed to days or weeks. So there are three aspects to our technology that we're going to go through briefly here at 40,000 feet to give you an idea of what we do. There are three steps in the Kubisys replication process. There's the discovery process, there's the capture, the actual capturing and replicating of the environment, and then obviously there's providing access to your individuals or teams that would want to access the Kubisys test environment to do their testing or validation of migration scenarios, whatever it might be. So in this particular scenario, you see we have 7 servers in Acme Manufacturing's production environment, a couple of domain controllers, 3 application servers, and a couple of SQL database servers. Now, in this case, we use LDAP and WMI, which everyone is very familiar with, Windows Management Instrumentation, basically to go in through the domain controllers of these particular servers and probe, query, and then catalog the metadata for each of these servers. This is a one-time event that captures the number of CPUs, the RAM size, disk volumes, network interfaces, and then the MAC and the IP addresses so that we can provision the virtual switch here in just a moment that we will talk about. This metadata, once it is captured, is then stored within the Kubisys platform, and this is in essence the raw material that will enable the provisioning of virtual machines that we're going to talk about in the next slide. So, first step is discovery. We use Windows and industry standard utilities here, LDAP and WMI, to facilitate that discovery process. Next is the capture process or the replication process, and there are 2 flavors of this. One is what we would call more transitory or more short-term. This is more for rapid iteration. We all know that new upgrades from Microsoft are coming with greater frequency, and they're not necessarily major mammoth upgrades. It's more iterative, midpoint type of upgrades, so rapid iteration from Kubisys aligns very nicely with that. In the capture process, in the transitory phase, we use a third utility, VSS, that you guys use today to do your backups. It's the volume shadow services from Microsoft. We take, now in the preceding slide, you could see the domain controller, app server 2, and SQL server 2. So now we're going to point and click on those particular servers, and John or Janice is going to now create a on-demand test environment in minutes. So what happens now is, based on the servers that have been selected, we use VSS to take a production point-in-time snapshot of the production disk within that server. That's a read-only snapshot that is then presented over the network and is provisioned as a virtual disk within the Kubisys test environment with a pointer back to production. In the transitory phase, there's no actual data moving over, so this happens in a very short amount of time. So you have remote read capability now provisioned within that Kubisys virtual machine. We then layer local write cache on top of that read-only disk, so you have local write remote read capability. In this case, any testing, any changes to the software that are done within that Kubisys test environment are written locally to the cache that has been provisioned on top of that read-only snapshot. There's a pointer back to production, and that's why this is a shorter term duration image, because if there's a network issue, any type of unforeseen circumstance that would basically cause that pointer to be lost, the image is lost. So this is typically for an afternoon, a day, a couple of days, maybe a week at the at the longest part of the runway. So this is very good for rapid iteration, where you capture a snapshot, validate an assumption, model a migration scenario. It either works or it doesn't, and then you can either discard that. You can quickly discard that instance and create another one in a few minutes or the following morning. So it's rapid iteration based on your definition of what rapid means. After the disk are provisioned, we then use the metadata from the preceding discovery process to provision virtual machines based on those virtual disks within that Kubisys test environment. You can have multiple teams accessing multiple Kubisys test environments within the Kubisys platform. Each instance is double natted, completely isolated, and there's a complete 100% demarcation between the different instances that your teams are accessing. We then plumb these virtual machines that we just talked about, app2, SQL2, DC2. Within that environment, we then plumb those virtual machines into an internal virtual switch and an internal firewall that enables the isolation and the interworking of the servers within that Kubisys test environment. They're communicating, they're interoperating just as they would in live production. Again, it's like for like. We then start the virtual machines, and your guys are ready to test in that environment. Now, as I said, the transitory phase, guys, is for a shorter term duration. And that's good for, X number of applications. But what if it's for UAT? What if it's for some longer standing requirement? What if you want to enable a agile development project off of a longer term, longer duration capture? And this is what we call the saved image phase. This is more of a longer term solution, multi-month in duration. And in this case, actual data does move over from the production server into the Kubisys software. That's why we said in the initial slide that it can take hours, well, for data to be moved over, multi-terabytes of data to be moved over into that disk can take the better part of a morning or, most of a night. Transitory captures typically take 15 to 20, 25 minutes. This more permanent capture can take, several hours to be facilitated, but still nowhere in the day or week range. So in this case, the actual data is moved over into the Kubisys platform, and then this becomes your golden image from which thinly provisioned captures can be spun up for a agile development initiative. As I said, UAT is a great application for this. You can capture a terminal server and populate that environment to teams that are looking to be tested on a new version of AX7, 8, whatever it might be, in an environment that actually replicates production. So it's not theoretical training. It's as close to hands-on live fire exercise as you can get. So there's two iterations here, more of a light, thinly provisioned, more of the saved image phase. Companies use both. It's really your personal preference, and obviously it's function mission driven. But we have two flavors there. And then the third aspect of it is access. So this is a screenshot, of a console going into it looks just like a Windows production environment because it's a complete replica. You can either RDP remotely into this instance. If you have teams that are testing, they can also export their set of tools into this image and test just like it was in live production, except it's completely non-invasive to production as we've talked about. Or you can use the serial console mode and go in directly through the front door. But accessing the environment is really no different than you would a live production environment. It's just a replica. It's a replica, not the real thing. So to put a bow on what we've just talked about in terms of the three steps, a discovery, capture, and access. Counterclockwise, as you can see, we discover and captures. We talked about, we replicate the production servers. They're provisioned on demand. We automate that process. Any local write changes to the software within the test environment can be pushed to your repository using whatever tool, that Team Foundation server, whatever your tool would be to export or push that production code to your code repository, and then it's introduced back into production, but only after you know that there will be no hiccups, no errant software being introduced into production. And we often tell clients that we encourage you to fail quickly and fail frequently. Fail as quickly as you can and fail as often as you can within our environment, because you're not blowing the house up. If it crashes in our test environment, it would have crashed production. So we take the risk of gnarly multi-point integrations off the table. If you have disparate levels of Windows softwares, we'll see here in a moment in a couple of use cases, a vintage version of AX, a multiplicity of ISV solutions that complicate the matter you're trying to implement, .NET or BizTalk, whatever it might be. We capture that entire environment and allow you to model different migration scenarios in a way that, again, is non-invasive to production, but you can get all the issues out on the table. This is an example. This is a screenshot of our UI. I mean, we won't spend a lot of time here, but just to show you for what we would call non-technical, as in Kubisys, technical literate Kubisys users. We don't want our software to stand in the way of your guys doing what they need to do, so they don't need to spend man-months learning the Kubisys platform. It's intuitive and very easy to use. This is what we call the main environment page that comes up on the left side at the top. You can see the actual production servers, the production resource tree. These are the servers within a Kubisys lab demo. These are the discovered servers that we talked about in the discovery phase. We've got a application, AX application server, SQL server, domain controller, SharePoint and Team Foundation server servers respectively. That's in our modest lab test environment. And then on the bottom left, we have the service catalog, where your teams can create environments, and each environment can be cataloged and contained within its own folder based on the use case. You can see we have a .NET suite there, Active Directory infrastructure upgrade. It could be a SQL schema upgrade, whatever it might be. We've got a couple of sprint projects there, a baseline for a agile sprint, and then a EDI testing environment that was comprised of the application server, SQL server, domain, and Team Foundation server. So obviously the list goes on, and it'd be tailored to your particular set of use cases. But your guys can go in, point and click on that environment, bring it up within minutes, and they're ready to test. On the right, is the environment overview, and you can see if you clicked on the AOS server there at the top of the list there, the metadata that was captured in the discovery process would be there in intimate detail for you to review. So again, we have a UI that's straightforward, easy to use, and we're not going to get in the way of the rapid adoption of this solution. How is the software delivered? As I said, it's a software solution, but we deliver it into your data center or your client's data center through any VMware EXI 5.5 hardware compatibility list compliant server within your data center. The minimum requirement that we would recommend is a 2-socket appliance, as you can see, 256 gigabyte of RAM and 16 terabytes of storage. Most people, prefer to, they have arrangements with the HPs, the Ciscos, the Dells of the world. So we just require a dedicated VMware ESXi 5.5 compliant server to host our software on, and you're good to go within a very short amount of time. So what does this mean for Dynamics AX users? Well, it's not only Dynamics AX, as we've talked about. It's really extensive Microsoft infrastructure users in general. Based on the visibility that we provide in terms of the like-for-like replication, and based upon the speed that we provide those environments, we're going to mitigate the risk and do it in a fraction of the time that you're normally used to. And again, we don't discriminate against application against the version of Windows or whether your servers are physical or virtual. That doesn't matter. If it's running on a Windows server, we can capture and replicate it in minutes. So risk and time are two of the twin towers that we're attempting to address. And I have a few more comments on that in just a moment after we talk about two particular use cases that hopefully you'll find interesting, and you may discover yourself here in the role to a degree. The first one is El Segundo, California-based PC Mall. These guys implemented a 1,500-seat Dynamics AX 2012 project, but as you can see, the disparity of Windows platforms was incongruent within their environment because they grew by acquisition. So they literally never knew what they were going to inherit. They had Dynamics 2012, Windows Server, SQL Server, Active Directory all over the map. And as they grew by acquisition, the ability to provide a centralized, cohesive, comprehensive test environment eluded them. So they bludgeoned the process, and a single test environment took over 80 man-hours to build, and even then it was a remote subset of actual production. It was the subset that we had talked about earlier. So there was no leading of the witness here, guys, on the bottom. These are PC Mall numbers to us, not us to them. So once they implemented Kubisys, they reduced the project timeline, the delivery of the AX12 enterprise-wide project by 6 months. They saved over $2 million a year in OpEx savings through consolidation of IT infrastructure that we'll talk about in a moment. They increased productivity by 1.5x, 48 code updates, basically one a week to one every slightly less than 2 weeks. They saved additional money on CapEx. And then one interesting thing is they used the Save Shadow. Every week they would capture a new Save Shadow image of their production environment. They would spin up the thinly provisioned environments with the local cache, as I talked about, and then they would do weekly sprints. Using Kubisys to do that, they implemented a agile development, a weekly sprint cadence. They followed the sun with three development teams, and that's how they were able to reduce that project timeline by 6 months. After the project was successfully delivered, they continued to patch, upgrade, and update Dynamics without any downtime, again, because the risk was taken off the table. So Sam, who's a great guy, at the bottom there, you can see the environments are not only built in record time, but more importantly, they mirror production. So changes made within the KTE will actually work in production. It's like for like replication. So all the guesswork, all the ambiguity, all the crossing of the fingers and hoping that it works is eliminated. There's no gray. It's either black or white. So that's a great success story for Kubisys. And I know we have a couple of life sciences customers or clients on the phone this morning. And this is ViroPharma, a life sciences company out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's just a more of a miniature version of the scenario at PC Mall, in that they also grew by acquisition. And in this case, they had more of a heterogeneous. It wasn't as much a Microsoft centric environment. They had Dynamics SL, a very vintage version of Dynamics. They had some business process control software from SAP running on Windows. Then they had a IBM BI suite, also Windows deployed. So these were Windows-based applications, but obviously this is the third-party software that we talked about earlier. They had very stale data, and they simply didn't have the resources in-house to build, the test environments. They refresh their environments once a quarter, as you can see, 4 times a year, once a quarter, and even that was an act of Congress. So by outsourcing the creation of these environments to Kubisys, they were basically able to refresh their environments 3 times a month, as opposed to 1 time per quarter. This was invaluable in terms of helping them close their books on time terms of reconciling differences between Europe and the US. They lowered their capital expenditures by $600,000. In other words, they were spending $60,000 a month on consultants, basically to build these environments. They were able to reduce that from $60,000 down to roughly $10,000 a month. So a draconian drop there. They were also able to basically take out of service 4 QA stations that were costing them, roughly $500,000 a year to operate. So they were able to completely disband those test environments and replicate and outsource that to Kubisys. So the director of financial services there, he says the biggest value, the business value to those guys was they were better able to foresee financial and system impacts before they manifested. So there was no crashing of their financial system. The SAP system with Kubisys, it was all captured, and they could basically model any scenario, any closing of the book scenario. They were able to do that within the Kubisys test environment. We have a number of other case studies, that are SharePoint specific in terms of being able to prevent or to shut the door on any downstream issues with SharePoint. We all know some of those issues where you upgrade SharePoint, it can inexplicably or inadvertently impact BizTalk, your e-commerce platform. It can affect governance issues. It can crash the system for whatever reason. So again, those examples of risk are also removed. So those are two case studies, ladies and gentlemen, and there's more. So the final slide for me would be in terms of business value. I think the reduction of risk, hopefully we've made that point to you today because of the visibility that we provide. Because of the visibility and the non-invasive nature of our platform, we're able to reduce the risk. That's pretty straightforward. Improving time to value or time to market, both as an end user and if you're a Microsoft partner, the ability to lock down, so to speak, the profitability within a fixed price contract that you might have. And with Kubisys as a competitive differentiator, might you consider a value-based, contract paradigm where you will guarantee contractually to deliver a project in a shorter amount of time with a value ascribed to that. So there's different ways the disruption of Kubisys could help your business. And then in terms of cost reduction, two things that we see time and time again with Kubisys is the self-service capability. So no longer are your testing teams tied to the IT operations guys to deliver a provision environment. They can create their own environment on demand. So rather than waiting, days or weeks, they can do it in a matter of minutes. As I said, they can validate an assumption. They can administrate a patch. They can test an upgrade from Microsoft and deliver it Friday morning at 10 o'clock, not the proverbial Sunday morning at 2 a.m. And also the consolidation of IT infrastructure, the need to build and maintain redundant test environments is basically removed because you're outsourcing that utility to Kubisys. So self-service and consolidation of IT infrastructure are huge game changers for clients that use Kubisys. And that's basically it. I'm going to turn it back to Roger. Roger, the con is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Greg, for walking us through your Kubisys world. In case you would like to have some additional information, you can always visit the websites, kubisys.com or iFacto.be. If you're in Europe, you can also contact me to schedule a demonstration. I'll be glad to come all your way and actually show you how quickly you can capture an environment and replicate it basically onto the Kubisys appliance. Likewise, in the US, for those in North America or the Americas, you can schedule a demonstration with Greg at christian@kubisys.com. I would like to thank you for attending this session. However, we would like to open up the floor, of course, for Q&A now. If you have any questions that you would like to see answered, we have an opportunity right now for you to actually ask your question. Okay, anyone, any questions? It seems like no one has any questions. I would therefore like to thank you all for attending, and I would like to wish you a nice continuation of your day, or a pleasant end of your day if you're in Europe. And thank you for attending this webinar, and hopefully we will see you at a next opportunity. And once again, this is the end of our webinar today, and hopefully you can all upgrade your ERP without delays or downtime using our Kubisys solution. Thank you very much.